Hi there, and welcome to Power Play. I'm Vashi Capellos in Ottawa on this Tuesday. Tonight, 4 years of Russia's war on Ukraine.
Canada stands with Ukraine. The coalition of the willing stands with Ukraine. We're in it for the long haul.
Canada is adding sanctions on Russia and sending more military aid to Ukraine to mark the somber anniversary. Is a negotiated end to this war in sight or even possible? We're going to ask Canadian Defence Minister David McGuinty and Ukraine's ambassador to Canada coming up. Then, the Conservatives' motion on asylum seekers' health care hits the House of Commons.
The Liberals haven't addressed the incentives to abuse the system, period.
Liberals push back on the Conservatives' motion, which calls for changes to the way health benefits are provided to asylum seekers. Our front bench will be here to unpack the political debate surrounding the motion. Louis Hammond, Larissa Waller, George Soule, and Laura Stone are all with us momentarily. Plus, Matt Genereux hits the road with the Prime Minister.
He's well versed in the economic side of things, of course on the security side of things as well. And so I welcome any help on these trips, and it'll be nice to see him on the trip.
The newly minted Liberal MP just a few weeks ago, a member of the Conservative caucus, is set to join Prime Minister Mark Carney on a 9-day international trip. The details are coming up a little bit later on in the show. First, though.
4 years on, Russia is failing militarily, strategically, and economically. And we are in it for the long term. So Canada stands with Ukraine. The coalition of the willing stands with Ukraine. We're in it for the long haul. Russia is failing. The sooner they come to the table and actually participate in peace negotiations, the better it will be.
Prime Minister Mark Carney there reaffirming Canada's support for Ukraine on the 4-year anniversary of Russia's full-scale invasion of the country. The Fed's here announcing a 3-year extension of Operation Unifier, where Canadian forces are among those training Ukrainian soldiers. Canada will also donate 400 armored vehicles to Ukraine and will impose new sanctions on 100 vessels from Russia's Shadow Fleet, which are used to bypass Western sanctions on Russian oil. David McGuinty is Canada's Minister of Defence. Hi, Minister. Pleasure to welcome you back to the program. Thank you so much for making the time.
Thanks very much, Vashi.
I wanted to start off on one aspect of the aid announced today, and that's the 400 armored vehicles. What is the timeline for delivery on that?
I'll have more to say about that. We have some of those that are on the line now, the production line. Some are completed. So we'll be negotiating the transport eventually and the sending of these vehicles with our Ukrainian counterparts.
Do you have a more general sort of time frame? And I ask, not out of any disregard for motivation here, but I just finished interviewing the Ukrainian ambassador who made a point of saying that timeliness was of the essence, that there are literally lives at stake with each passing day. Do you have even a broad time frame for delivery of these vehicles?
He's right that timeliness is a big factor. That's why we've already made the decision to start shipping, for example, a number of AIM missiles. I met with the Minister of Defense of Ukraine just a week or 10 days ago in Brussels for about an hour and a half to get a real sense of the materiel, as it's called, that they need more desperately. So we're focusing in on the material that we've got that we can actually remove from our stockpile and distribute it and send over there on an urgent basis. And as you know, we've already purchased a certain amount of material from the United States through the list, the shopping list, so to speak, that the Ukrainians provide to the Americans that we purchase in terms of what's already available, and that's already been shipped over.
I take your point on all of that. I appreciate all the details. My question, though, Minister, was about the 400 vehicles that you're promising today. And in particular, when you talk about armored vehicles, there was 25 refurbished ones, that were promised in September of 2023. And then 2 years later, that contract was nullified. So just in the vein of, providing assurances to Ukrainians that these are coming, what can you say?
I can say they're coming. I can say that the commitment's been made. I can say we're entering into a new fiscal year on April 1st. But we understand the urgency of this. That's why I met with the Minister of Defense from Ukraine just 10 days ago. And I've ordered my team and my staff and the department and the manufacturers to move as quickly as we can to get these vehicles into the hands of our Ukrainian counterparts.
Can we serve our own military minister and do this at the same time? I'm looking at the latest data available from your department. And right now, 46% of the Army's vehicles are deemed as not serviceable.
Vashi, we are completely rebuilding, rearming, rebooting the Canadian Armed Forces. This morning I announced 7,500 new homes that will be built, 1- and 2-bedroom apartments mostly, in 25 locations around the country. We're assessing and rebuilding the healthcare clinics on our bases. Water and wastewater systems are now going to be under construction. We're buying new generators, new kit, new female uniforms, rifle, ammunition. Everything right now is being revisited. Everything is being rebuilt. And so as a result of the needs that we obviously know we have, because we have let many things slip for decades, we're moving quickly. And that's why I was so proud just again this morning to announce 7,500 new housing units, which makes a big difference for the folks who are serving now, and a 13% increase in applications to join the Canadian Armed Forces in the last 6 months.
Yeah, none of that should be easily dismissed. And like I say to you often, I do take your point on all of that. And certainly there's been a lot more action on this front in the last year than in the 10 years prior. But when you talk about decades of inaction, it was your party in charge of the government for the last decade. That serviceability rate right now, 46%. Again, are you confident that you're going to be able to increase that rate in a way that is commensurate with the needs of the Canadian Army and also supply 400 new vehicles to Ukraine?
Yes, I'm confident, and I'll tell you why. We launched the Defence Industrial Strategy, the first of its kind in Canadian history, just last week. We're going to be hyper-stimulating the domestic defence industry, the sector here in Canada. It's already starting to happen. Money's flowing into the country. EDC is already financing a number of deals overseas that previously were not even on the radar screen. There's a huge interest now. I've just come back from Esquimalt, where we're preparing our naval base there to receive up to 12 submarines. We're moving at a pace, Vashi, that we've never seen before. Just on the submarines for a second, if I could, we had 5 original bidders. We down-selected within 6 months. Normally that process takes 3 years. So we're moving quickly. We're moving quickly to give the energy, give the sector, the defence industrial sector, the push it needs. The Canadian banking sector's on board. Our venture capitalists are on board. Money's flowing in. The Prime Minister is bringing in foreign direct investment like we've never seen before. So yes, I'm confident we're going to build something here that's really quite new.
You mentioned submarines. Since you brought it up, Minister, I have to ask, is there a timeline for that announcement that you can share with our viewers tonight?
No, I can't share a timeline for that because it's like all the major procurements that we pursue. This is now over to the Defence Industrial Agency, the new agency that we stood up for this very purpose. We're streamlining procurement. We're professionalizing procurement. We indicate as the client what we need at DND and the Canadian Armed Forces. And this new agency goes out and purchases the equipment. So it is now in the full negotiations with both of the bidders, Korea and Germany and Norway. And of course, they'll have a lot more to say. And folks are beginning to put their pen to paper. They are making their offers. They are looking to address our needs. We want to see buy Canadian provisions, steel, aluminum, beyond, labor, jobs, industrial benefits. All of this will be part and parcel of the exact kind of stimulation of the defense sector that we anticipate under the Defence Industrial Strategy.
How transparent does your government plan on being about markers that you hit in the interim? And I ask because when you reference the Defence Industrial Policy, the objectives that your government has talked to Canadians about are a decade-long horizon, right? 250,000 new jobs, revenue growth in the sector by 240%, a vast swing, for example, from contracts awarded to non-Canadian companies to Canadian companies to 70%. Again, though, all of it is 10 years out in the horizon. You're naming a lot of stuff that is happening, but objectively, like, I don't have necessarily evidence of much of that to hold your government to account. And last week when I was interviewing ministers on this, they were unable to say if there would be objectives in the interim. Like, you may not be in power in 10 years is basically what I'm getting at. So how will Canadians know objectively your plan is working or not?
Well, I think they're going to know it objectively because the early evidence and data that's coming in is actually so positive and strong. For example, let's start with the 2% commitment. Many people were doubtful about our ability to meet the 2% GDP commitment under NATO. I'm confident we're going to hit that target by March 31st. Now we're laying track for the 3.5%. I'm confident that our numbers are up 13% in terms of applications to join the Canadian Armed Forces. I'm also confident those numbers are going to continue to increase. I'm confident that the numbers in terms of trade finance deals are up $800 million at Export Development Canada in the last 6 months or less. I'm confident that we're moving quickly now in terms of the selection of a submarine fleet for our future, having down selected within 6 months instead of 3 years. The kinds of metrics you rightly are asking about, Vashi, are metrics that we're going to drive. Now, the question of whether or not what we're doing would transcend one government into another, I sure hope so. I think that all parliamentarians understand that we have an obligation here to rebuild our armed forces and to finance them appropriately. And I think that what we're laying track here for will transcend our government and any government going forward. We have an obligation to keep this country secure and sovereign. The landscape's changed, the threat landscape's changed, and I think what you're going to see is those numbers that will give you, I hope, comfort and confidence that we're meeting the targets.
Minister, I'll conclude where I began on Russia's war on Ukraine and ask you very specifically, if I could, do you think a negotiated end to this war is possible, given Donald Trump's lack of moral clarity on Russia's wrongdoing and his willingness to entertain their territorial goals in Ukraine?
I think it's very important for us to keep talking. I commend the United States administration for its efforts to try to bring the parties to the table. This is not a simple solution or simple situation, forgive me. Look, the war has been going on exactly 4 years too long. We're hopeful that we're going to see some way to bring this to a ceasefire and ultimately to a cessation of hostilities. But meanwhile, we stand four square with Ukraine. There's a lot at stake here. I meet with my European counterparts, Vashi. They're deeply, deeply worried about the transition that's going on inside the Russian economy right now. So what we're seeing now is a fragile moment. We're hopeful. We're going to continue to be encouraging. And when we do get a cessation of hostilities, Canada will be there to help rebuild Ukraine.
But Minister, with all due respect, why are you commending the United States for facilitating these talks when they refuse to call out Russia and Vladimir Putin for their wrongdoing?
Because when you have a dialogue, Vashi, you have a dialogue. And if there's an opportunity to bring parties to a table, that's a positive start. That's how negotiation works. That's been my experience as a previous negotiator. So right now, if the United States is helping to pull the parties together, if there is exchange of views, that's an important first step to be able to get the dialogue we need to get a cessation of hostilities.
I'll leave it on that note. Minister, always a pleasure. I appreciate you making the time very much.
Thank you, Vashi.
Defense Minister David McGuinty. Later on in our program, we're going to speak with Ukraine's ambassador to Canada to continue marking the 4th anniversary of Russia's war on Ukraine. Up next, though, after a short break, we're going to tackle debate on the Conservatives' motion on health care for asylum seekers and the news that Matt Genereux, who crossed the floor to the Liberals last week, is set to join the Prime Minister on all the legs of a big international trip. Our front bench is here to talk about both those things. Louis Hammond, Larissa Waller, George Soule, and Laura Stone. They're back with me in just 2 minutes. Stay right there.
Mass, out-of-control liberal immigration has overwhelmed the system. And many of those resources are going to people who are here illegally and have been rejected.
Mr. Speaker, yes, Canada is not America. Yes, Canada provides essential health care to everyone in this country.
After 11 years of Liberal government, we have 6 million Canadians who cannot find a family doctor. Will he take his head out of the stand, vote for our motion, and give Canadians back the health care they deserve?
I just got here. The Leader of the Opposition has been here his entire career, with one exception. Now, during the time that Canada's new government has been here, we have reduced asylum seekers by 1/3.
The Conservatives have introduced a motion calling for a review of health care benefits given to asylum seekers and restricting who has access. As you heard there, the Liberals don't appear to be on board. The Tories want changes to what's known as the Interim Federal Health Program, which covers medical care for refugees and asylum seekers who aren't covered provincially, but has quadrupled in cost since 2020, according to Parliament's budget watchdog. The motion requests that only emergency life-saving medical services be covered for people appealing asylum claims that have been rejected. The Liberals contend the Conservatives are, quote, punching down. Let's bring in the front bench to talk about this. Louis Hammond was a senior advisor to Industry Minister François-Philippe Champagne. Larissa Waller is the founder of Henley Strategies and former head of communications for Ontario's Premier Doug Ford. George Soule was the former director of communications for the federal NDP. He's now a principal at On Step Strategies. And Laura Stone is a Queen's Park reporter for the Globe and Mail. Hi, everybody. Nice to see you on this Tuesday. Larissa, I'll start with you on this. The opposition gets the chance to choose what motion they want to introduce when they have the opportunity to. Like, why do you think this is something they want to focus on, the Conservatives want to focus on right now? I'm going to have to, sorry, something's muted. My apologies. We'll have to wait just a moment.
That's my fault.
Once there it is. It's all good. No worries.
I'm so sorry.
We don't know what you said, so no worries. Start from the beginning if you could.
Yeah, I know. I think the Conservatives went with this one because it's a pain point that Canadians are feeling from coast to coast. If you watched Michelle Rempel-Garner's press conference, she listed off the benefits that refugee claimants and asylum seekers are getting. They include things like speech pathology, vision care, sort of those extras in healthcare that Canadians either pay for out of pocket or have to get through their benefits program. I'll give you an example. My son needed speech therapy, right? And when he was in junior kindergarten, I put him on a wait list for the province's speech therapy. We didn't get assessed until I think he was in grade 4, right? And I didn't have benefits that covered it. And I paid out of pocket, like most Canadians pay out of pocket. And to hear that, you know, people with refugee claimants have come to Canada and are getting benefits like this, that really kind of, it makes people take on almost an anti-immigrant feeling. And most of these people are not anti-immigrant. And the Liberals are desperate to make this an argument about, do you support immigration and refugees and asylum seekers, or do you not? And the Conservatives are saying there's a lot more nuance in that, and you've made this system too rich and too appealing, and that's one of the reasons that it's getting abused like this.
I feel like there's kind of a lack, George, of nuance in this case, on the extreme of either side. It's like if you want to raise a discussion about immigration and the programs in place, you're kind of labeled racist pretty quickly, or you're beating on the most vulnerable. At the same time, if you believe in those kinds of programs, you're almost labeled as like you'd rather give those services to immigrants than you would to Canadian citizens. Like, is it possible to actually talk about immigration in a productive way politically right now?
I mean, I think that should be. I don't think the Conservatives are putting any effort into doing that. I think there's a few things going on. One is there's a massive backlog in these asylum seekers, and so that's part of what's happening. Is there's folks who are waiting months and years and a long time to get in. So that's why that price gets so high, because the idea is they're supposed to be here for a brief time. They get processed. Are they legitimate asylum seekers? Great, they get to stay. We're Canada. We want to be welcoming. They're not legit. Then sorry, you got to leave. You got to go through the other process to immigrate. And because there's such a backlog, we're seeing these prices skyrocket. But instead of solving that problem, we're seeing Liberals and Conservatives, gang up together to cut more public servants who would do some of that processing to get that backlog cut back down. And then the other part of that is also, again, like we're blaming these asylum seekers for cuts to our healthcare system or lack of more healthcare. But the asylum seekers aren't the ones who cut healthcare provincially. They're not the ones who cut healthcare transfers federally. If we wanted to make the system, both sides, both the processing of these asylum seekers and the actual healthcare system itself better, it's the government's investing in those programs that will save it, not cutting it and then trying to blame immigrants for the problem.
Well, there's a couple of things, Louis, that the Parliamentary Budget Officer assessed to contribute to the escalating costs. And I will say some of the assumptions that the PBO made are based, for example, on the number of claimants continuing to rise at rapid rates, which is part of what caused the cost to go up before, but hasn't been the case in the last year. So between 2024 and 2025, 80,000 fewer people made those asylum claims. At the same time, it is the amount of time, as George points out, that was a huge cost driver, according to the PBO. And the Liberals contend that their new bill, C-12, will have an effect on that, but they can't say by how much.
Well, how to put this, Vashi? I mean, you've heard the saying, when all else fails, go after the immigrants. I mean, you figure that with all the challenges that Canada is facing right now, the Conservatives would find another topic to discuss on their Oppo Day. But I can understand why they're doing this. I mean, this works. They know that both healthcare and immigration are hot-button issues, and when combined together, they make a very potent mix. But should we be surprised by this? Of course not. I mean, there's a reason why the Conservatives are doing this. They're trying to change the channel. Why? because their poll numbers are tanking, because they've got MPs crossing the floor every other week or so, it seems, and because their leader is dragging the party down. What I find particularly despicable about all this is the fact that not only are they going after immigrants, but they're going after the most vulnerable of immigrants. You're talking about asylum seekers here who've had their claims rejected. I can't think of more defenseless people around. And it was actually a little bit laughable to see Michelle Rempel-Gardner today made it sound as though as soon as these guys have their claims rejected, the first thing they do is they run to the nearest hospital to get healthcare services. She knows that's not true. We know that's not true. If you know anything about asylum seekers in that kind of situation, most of them live in hiding, never mind going to the hospital. So again, a very sorry spectacle today in the House of Commons, and it probably explains why the Conservatives are where they are today.
I think a couple of things, Laura, could be true at the same time. I do think that there have been a lot of stories in the media about people seeking asylum when they didn't meet the conditions set out, and that drives a lot of concern about the system as a whole. At the same time, I do understand Louis' point that those who do seek, refugee status are often among the most vulnerable in society. To be clear, it would be helpful if there was data, more concrete data on exactly who was accessing these services and at what point in the sort of path to getting your claim approved or not you actually were. I looked for that data yesterday in preparing for an interview that I did on the subject. I couldn't find it anywhere, which makes it, I think, why the discussion becomes so political, because there isn't a ton of data around this.
Yeah, I mean, all we're hearing about is the ballooning costs writ large and the wait times. I mean, what the Conservatives are trying to do here is to find the next big issue, to hone in on a concern of Canadians, centering primarily, I think, around affordability, right? And the benefits afforded to working Canadians, and this sentiment that people feel like no matter how hard they work, they can't get ahead, they can't get, they can't get glasses through, even though they're working hard. This is where they're trying to pinpoint and differentiate themselves, I think, from the Liberals, and the Conservatives have struggled, obviously, since Prime Minister Carney's government came in and kind of closed the gap on some of these policy issues. I think we've also seen kind of a shifting wind on overall views about immigration, and we saw this even under Prime Minister Trudeau in his admission that that they didn't get the balance quite right. I think he called it to do with international students and let in too many people, and how that has affected affordability, housing prices, services. So I think there is something there that Canadians generally agree with, and the Conservatives are just trying to take it to the next level to gain attention, quite frankly, and to win over kind of the public sentiment, possibly because there is this dearth of specific data to point to on just how many people are accessing that. We know that costs are rising, but the Liberals' response is that they are trying to address it through their own legislation. So they're almost having the same argument, but just trying to approach it differently. I think it all has to do, though, with this affordability crisis and both parties trying to win over public opinion on that front.
I got to switch gears and get one more round in on the newest Liberal MP, this time going on a trip with Prime Minister Mark Carney. That's Matt Jenneru I'm speaking about, who crossed the floor last week from the Conservatives. Have a listen to the International Trade Minister, Maninder Sidhu, reflect on Mr. Jenneru accompanying the Prime Minister on this trip.
What about Matt Jenneru? He's going on this trip. What's his role? What will he bring?
Yeah, look, I have tremendous amount of respect for Matt. We sat on the Trade Committee for a number of years together, and so he's always leaned forward for Canada. When anything comes up at committee, I have a tremendous working relationship with him, and so he's well versed in the economic side of things, of course on the security side of things as well, and so I welcome any help on these trips, and it'll be nice to see him on the trip.
Is it a present for crossing the floor?
Absolutely not. He brings much value to the team. I've seen that firsthand at Trade Committee, and so I'm happy that he's coming along because we can use the help.
Okay, Larissa, what's your reaction to that?
So I'm not going to take this as an opportunity to criticize Matt Jenneru. I did that last week. I disagreed with his decision to cross the floor. I thought it was kind of low. Listen, if he was going on this trip as a partisan Conservative, I'd be singing Mark Carney's praises of taking somebody so competent and accomplished and somebody who really understands the file, given his experience with international trade, committee. That's still true. Like, good for him. He's not. He's a smart man who I'm sure will contribute positively. If I was a member of the Liberal caucus, I'd be like, hey, what about me? I've put in my dues. I've put in my time. I've also sat on the committees. I've also worked really, really hard. Matt Jenneru did that for the other team until about 30 seconds ago. So if I was a Liberal, I'd be upset about it. I think, honestly, Mark Carney should look to more Conservative bench members who have a lot of experience in the region and take them too. I won't name them because I think that will decrease their chance of being invited. But yeah, I mean, I think that the criticism here is if you are a Liberal and you've put in your dues and you've put in your time and you've done the fundraising and you're not being invited. Matt Jenneru is a smart man, and I wish them all the best. We're all going to benefit if these missions are successful. And you've seen Conservatives support Liberal foreign policy and trade missions in the past, and I think generally you'll see that on this one.
So Matt Jenneru and Michael Ma, I believe, were sitting together. I think we have some viz in the House of Commons today, and in the same row, or Chris D'Entremont, all three of them basically in the same row. If we can roll that viz whenever you have a chance. George, your thoughts on the trip?
Well, I mean, once you establish the kind of politician you are, you're just haggling over the price after that. And I think this is the kind of thing that we see all the time in when people cross the floor, is exactly how much did it cost and what was the gift. And so, this is a junket for him. I mean, look, it's nice that he sat in the committee, but this is not what Matt Jenneru was known for on Parliament Hill. Far from it. His high credentials on international issues. So, yeah, this is a junket. It was part of the gift. It was part of what he was given. All these titles he's getting tacked onto are part of what he was handed in order to cross the floor. So, again, compare this with the conversation we were just having, where we spent an entire day in the House of Commons talking, where the Conservatives were attacking some of the most desperate people in the world who come to this country to be saved, but we don't have enough money to help them out. Meanwhile, the Prime Minister is handing out gifts and free trips around the world to former Conservatives to cross the floor so that they'll join his caucus and he can somehow get his majority. I mean, that's the comparison we should be really looking at.
Louis, are you as offended?
Well, I guess this goes to show you that there are perks to be had by being with the guys in power. I mean, there's no question about it. And I'm sure that's not lost on a lot of potential other floor crossers, by the way. Now, is the fact that Matt Jenneru is accompanying the Prime Minister on this trip simply a political stunt? I don't think so. I mean, come on. The guy was named last week as special advisor to the Prime Minister on security and economic issues or partnerships. And so I think it makes sense for him to accompany the Prime Minister to India, Australia, and Japan. Now, over and above that, I think, Bashi, what's important to look at here is that, the Prime Minister has to make sure to showcase these guys a little bit ever since they crossed the floor, because it's one thing for you to cross the floor, but you want to make sure that these guys stick around when the next election comes around, which may be sooner than we think. Because I don't know about Michael Ma, but I was looking at the numbers for Jenneru and D'Entremont, and they won their seats last time around, just barely. And so you want to make sure that next time that the election rolls around, these guys are able to show that, they travel with the big boss, they've got agency with the big boss, and that they get that stamp of approval, which is going to be the most important, which is a stamp of approval at the ballot box with their voters. That's not going to turn on them because they switch sides. And so I think there's a little bit of that going on as well. But, this is all par for the course, I guess. Somebody crosses the floor, you've got to give them a little bit of a perk, a little bit of something, and especially in this case, as I said, with MPs that barely won their seats last time around, you want to make sure that they're back on your bench after the next election.
Laura, I've just got 30 seconds left. They're all yours. Final word.
To me, this is this pure and true gloating. I mean, you don't put the floor crossers on the front bench unless you are trying to rub it in the other guy's face, right? This is sort of like breaking up with your boyfriend, showing up the next day in the cafeteria of the high school, holding hands with your new boyfriend. I mean, this is to rub it in. Not that I've ever done that.
I'm not above
this
it.
This is to as Louis said, to show the other guys, look, there's benefits to coming on our sides. It's to make Pierre Poilievre feel foolish. It's to rub it in his face. I do think it is sending a message to other potential floor crossers that there are benefits to be had on the Liberal side of things. I think it could stir up some unrest, as Larissa noted, with other Liberal backbenchers who have not ever won a place in cabinet or afforded such trips. So something to watch for there. But this is just to this is a show, and it looked like the Liberals were happy to present it today in the House.
I'll leave it right there. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate the discussion. Our front bench, Louis Hammond, Larissa Waller, George Soule, and Laura Stone. We're back in just a moment with more Power Play just ahead. Welcome back to Power Play. We are continuing our coverage tonight of the 4-year anniversary of Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine. Andriy Plahotniuk is Ukraine's ambassador to Canada. Hi, Ambassador. Good to welcome you here, though I do wish it were under a different circumstance.
Thank you for having me.
As we sort of collectively mark 4 years of Russia's war on Ukraine, what's going through your mind?
Firstly, it's a very sad day, of course, for all Ukrainians, because we, as a peace-loving nation, we would do everything to have peaceful life, free of these atrocities and pain and blood. Certainly, the war of Russia started 12 years ago, but when we're talking about full-scale military invasion, it started 4 years ago. What I feel now, I feel that we are still united. We are still very strong, despite all atrocities and despite that we are tired. And it's great, and we are pleased, and we are honored to have so many friends around the world who support us today and will continue to support us in the future.
4 years ago, I remember covering the war as it broke out, and the various officials who would talk to us on background said that the intelligence shared with them showed that, Russia could take Kyiv, for example, in a matter of days. Obviously, that did not happen. What does that say to you about Ukraine's ability and willingness and want to defend itself?
Everything is about Ukrainian people. Everything is about our desire and strong wish to defend our land. We don't want any foreign lands, but we will defend ours. That's the matter of principle. And we will continue to do that because it's so existential for us. And many people say today and yesterday that if Ukraine stops, there will be no Ukraine. If Putin stops, if we make him stop the war, there will be peace, democracy, rule of law, and everything, freedom for Ukraine. So it's about our people, about our resolve. And it's about certainly our, soldiers on the battlefield, our volunteers, medical workers, and leadership.
Remind people watching, if you could, at the great cost that has come to Ukrainians as well, right? That so much suffering has been endured, the loss of life, injuries. What should we know about what Ukraine is enduring at this very moment?
Ukraine is surviving through, I think, one of the hardest winters because the temperature is, far below zero, and certainly, Russians are targeting our critical energy infrastructure. It's about genocidal war, I think. It's about killing civilians. It's about depriving them of ability to have heating, to have water, to have electricity, and many other things. But despite that, we continue to fight for our lives. We continue to support our families. We continue to support each other. We continue to get and to receive generous assistance from foreign governments. And that makes us feel that we are not alone in our fight for freedom and dignity. And by the way, using this opportunity, today we have excellent package, another strong package from the Canadian government. Very robust one, very comprehensive. It covers everything. Military assistance, training of Ukrainian military, which started more than 10 years ago and will be extended. We have donation of armored vehicles, and we have support for energy, which is so urgent and so vital. And we have also sanctions. And please rest assured, dear Canadian friends, that everything that is done today, that has been done before, it really matters. It really what we need now, what we need desperately.
And I want to follow up on that and ask you about the need in particular for military assistance to enable the defense of Ukraine and the timeliness of it. Like, if you could, how fast would you be receiving this aid?
We are grateful for any kind of defense material that we get. But timing for us, it equals the lives of soldiers, it equals the lives of civilians. So if we have air defense, civilians are protected. If we have armored vehicles, we have more people saving their lives. So timing really matters, and certainly we understand and we know that Canadian government, Canadian companies, and all people who every day show this commitment by doing everything possible and impossible to shorten the deliveries of this equipment. It's really welcome, and we really highly appreciate that.
I have to conclude by asking about the elephant in the room, which is certainly the U.S., this administration's posture on the war, and in particular, kind of a moral ambiguity about calling out Putin for the atrocities against Ukraine that he has wielded, that he has launched. In what way do you think that impacts the prospect for peace?
Let me say it like this. We need to survive. We need to find a way to continue our fight, and we need American partners, like we need all other partners, to continue to support us. And when we all together, when we win the war, then we will have bright prospects for prosperity for all other countries. So every single step matters. Ukrainians have no time to be sad, despite everything. We need to keep moving. We need to continue with our reforms. We need to continue to support our families. Our kids need to go to school. And in order to achieve peace, just comprehensive peace, we will do everything possible together with all our partners to win this war.
I will leave it on that note. Ambassador, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Always a pleasure to be here.
After a short break, you just heard from Ukraine's ambassador to Canada. How steadfast is support for Ukraine with no negotiated end to the war in sight? We're going to ask two of Ukraine's foremost allies after a short break. Back in a moment. Welcome back to Power Play. 4 years ago today, Russia launched its full-scale invasion of Ukraine, which has become Europe's biggest conflict since the Second World War. Before the break, you heard from Ukraine's ambassador to Canada. Now for some perspective from Ukraine's European allies. Witold Jelski is Poland's ambassador to Canada, and Chorvan Bellman is Germany's ambassador to Canada. Hello to both of you. Thank you very much for making the time for the conversation today. I really appreciate it. Ambassador Bellman, I'll start with you. You know, 4 years is a hard amount of time to picture. It certainly feels very weighted today. What does it signify? What does that period of time signify to you?
I think it's a very grim anniversary, obviously. All the loss of life, the pain, it makes me angry, and it makes me incredibly, my heart is broken over the fact that we are entering a 5th year of war. I will never forget the early days of the war and how we had, at the time I was the ADM in charge of coordinating G7 and also in charge of Ukraine in the German Foreign Office, and how we had to organize the whole G7 support for Ukraine and learn from scratch and learn how to organize different weapon systems and then how to organize energy and all these different phases the war went through. I think we made many mistakes over these years. We learned a lot over these years. Today, Germany is Ukraine's biggest supporter in terms of civilian and military aid, and our support will remain steadfast, and we will not waver.
I remember actually in the weeks that followed the beginning of this war, I was in Poland, where many of the refugees at the time, Ambassador, were being welcomed. There was a huge amount of support for those refugees at the time and for Ukrainians' cause. How would you assess the level of support in Poland and more largely among Ukraine's allies right now?
Well, that time was the beginning of the full-scale aggression was a quite spectacular time in terms of humanitarian support. We had in 2000, there was more or less 10 million people going back and forth through the border. About 2 million refugees that were welcomed to the Polish families, mostly women and children at that time. It's a different it's a different situation today. There are still many Ukrainians in Poland, about 2 million, but they work. They add to building the resilience of the eastern flank, and in that regard, they also continue supporting Ukraine. The support is still there, but it's of a different quality.
When you think about the significance, Ambassador, of support from Ukraine's allies at this moment in time, when you reflect, for example, on the anger you feel entering the 5th year of this war? How would you assess that level of support relative to where it was, let's say, at the outset?
I think it's much more substantial today, and especially in this phase where some of the US support we've seen in the past, and which was so hugely important, is not there anymore. So I think we Europeans really realized that we have to step up. I think we've largely managed to do that. Of course, there is a big gap, but I would say if you look at all the initiatives we've taken, how inside NATO now Europeans buy urgently needed weapons, US weapons that Ukraine needs from the US in order to allow for these weapons still to continue to flow to Ukraine. When you see the amount of funding we have mobilized over the years, it's unprecedented. I've never seen that amount of support for any conflict in the world. So I think we very much realize that this is not just Ukrainians fighting for their freedom, this is the future of the security in Europe that this war is all about.
Ambassador, what do you think people outside of Europe may not understand about the stakes of this war?
Well, for Ukrainians, the stakes are quite obvious. It's independence, it's their freedom, it's the ability of the future generations to decide for themselves. For our region, for Europe, we understand the reasons as well. But in broader sense, in our transatlantic sphere, it's really about future. We are NATO, and we like to see NATO as the dominant power globally because it has positive influence on our life, but we believe also on the entire globe. And the significance of that conflict is that if we show weakness and we lack in providing support to Ukraine, we will show the weakness of NATO. And this will be a very different future than we would like to have.
If the leadership of the United States right now is unconvinced of what your colleague just laid out, how much harder does it make accomplishing that?
I think we are in a constant dialogue with the US on Ukraine. The negotiations are going on between Ukrainians and Americans and Russians. We have made sure that we bring the European voice to bear in this process. It's especially the E3 that are very active in this regard, but also the broader coalition of the willing, including Canada. It is constant work, and the Chancellor has made clear time and again that Europe will only support a deal that reflects Ukrainian interests and our interests. But it's a necessity to have this conversation, and we will continue to do so.
It brings me, Ambassador, to the prospect of a negotiated settlement, right? There are today words coming from the United States about the possibility of discussions even this week and another round of so-called negotiations. Based on what you know about how those have unfolded so far and what you know about Putin, what do you think the prospect of such a settlement is?
Well, I mean, we support the peace negotiations and finding a permanent solution according to Ukrainian needs. This is a process that we obviously support. At the same time, we observe and we know the tactics applied by Russia, applied by Putin, which aim at prolonging the process. We've seen those negotiations continuing, and there are suggestions on the American side, there are proposals, and there's just prolonging tactics on the side of Russia, which means that either Russia is not ready to have a serious conversation, or they don't want to have it.
What are the implications of that, do you think, for Ukraine?
Well, at the moment, it's very clear the war's going on. Putin could end this war any day if he seriously wanted to. I agree with Witold that, and the Chancellor has said so publicly, that Russia will only be ready to seriously engage for peace if either economically or militarily they understand that it is in their interest to do so. And I don't think this is where we are at the moment. So we do see these tactics of prolonging the process, and which is why we have to do everything to make sure that the Ukrainians receive the support they deserve and that they need in order to be able to continue to negotiate from a position of strength.
A final word to you on that, Ambassador.
Well, look, it's a grim anniversary, but at the same time we have to stay positive and believe in Ukraine being victorious in the end, and we need to provide support in that regard. We know history, and Russia is a power, but this is a power which lost a number of wars against smaller actors. They lost against Finland in 1939, but de facto they lost. They lost the war with Japan with the beginning of the 18th century. They lost against Poland in 1920. They lost in Afghanistan. They lost, and they are right now fighting a 4-year war against Ukraine, which is a smaller power as well. And Russians don't have much to show off in this regard. So we have to stay positive, we have to stay united, and we have to continue providing support to Ukrainians because it's really about the future.
I'll leave it on that note. Thank you very much, both of you, for making time for us. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having us.
We'll take one final break here on Power Play. We've got our takeaway next. Stay right there. Our takeaway tonight is all about what's happening a little bit later, 3 hours from now to be precise. The U.S. President Donald Trump will deliver his State of the Union address. His aides are telling members of the press that it could last anywhere from 2 to 3 hours. We're going to carry it on ctvnews.ca and on our CTV News app, so you can access it there. Two things in particular I'll be watching for. Number one, is anything said about Iran and U.S. military plans to strike Iran in some capacity. There was a meeting of the so-called Gang of Eight. Those are the top congressional leaders that get briefings from the Secretary of State on issues related to national security and intelligence. That happened today at the White House with Marco Rubio and the so-called Gang of Eight. That's leading to a lot of speculation. There could be something on Iran in this speech. And then second of all, of course, most importantly, I'm looking to find out what the president has to say about his tariff regime and how it may end up applying to Canada. I'll leave our program there. Thanks for watching. Have a great rest of your night.